On Sunday, we had the Sakhir Grand Prix in Bahrain. And here are the three podium finishers. We had Sergio Perez, who won. We had Esteban Ocon, who got second. And we had Lance Stroll in third place. A double podium for Racing Point. Kind of cool for them. But number one, I want to say that every single week, it gets more and more ridiculous that Sergio Perez doesn't have anywhere to drive next year. I go, how is this possible that all of F1 is just snubbing him? It makes no sense to me. The dude is literally winning races, and yet nobody wants him. I go, what's happening here? It's clearly ridiculous. It's clearly money and politics and stupid nonsense. My honest thought is that Red Bull had better make a move to go get Sergio Perez. They're number 2 right now in Formula 1. They cannot beat Mercedes, and a big part of why they can't challenge Mercedes, part of it is their car, and part of it is because they haven't had a number 2 driver at all this year who could push, Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas. They couldn't have anybody to help them in their strategy. It was basically Max racing alone against 2 Mercedes all year. Go get Sergio Perez. I don't know what's going on, and maybe part of it is because Red Bull doesn't want to completely lose Alex Albon. Totally fine. I understand that. Maybe they feel like they've been developing him and they can't afford to lose him, or I'm sure a lot of it's sponsorship money. He's got sponsorships in Thailand. Totally fine, I get that. But remove Daniel Kvyat and move Alex Albon down to Alpha Tauri. But for 2021, the Red Bull lineup had better be Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez. If it's not, then it's crazy to me. It's also crazy that nobody else wants him. Like, does nobody want to be competitive? Other than the team in America, Haas, I can never say their name right. What's happening here? Because I don't want Sergio Perez's talent wasted with the crappy American team. I don't know what's going. It makes no sense to me, and I don't know. It's absolute lunacy if Sergio Perez cannot find anywhere to drive next year in 2021 in Formula One. Now on lap 1 of the Sakhir Grand Prix, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc wiped out. Leclerc didn't leave enough room for Sergio Perez around the inside. They ran into each other. That busted Leclerc's Ferrari. Max Verstappen swerved to avoid them, ran into the barrier. And so even after lap 1, it's kind of crazy. Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc were out. And Sergio Perez had to take a pit stop, and yet he still won the race. I mean, it goes to show how good Sergio Perez is, how good that car is, the Racing Point Mercedes. But also, it's worth noting, Mercedes should have won this race. It's kind of crazy. For most of the race, Mercedes had a 1 and 2 spot where George Russell was leading and Valtteri Bottas was right behind him. But then they had a really, really badly butchered pit stop where they tried to double stack. They put George Russell in. They gave him the wrong tires. They also gave Valtteri Bottas the wrong tires. George Russell left. They realized the problem. They had to circle him back around, get the right tires on his car. No penalty there because they did it within 3 laps. They took Valtteri Bottas' tires on, put him on, realized these are the wrong tires. They took him back off, put his old tires on. So basically, he wasted 52 seconds sitting, taking a pit stop, didn't even get new tires. And by the way, kind of crazy, a 52-second pit stop is, here's why that's important, a lap time at the Sakhir Grand Prix. The fastest lap recorded on the day was George Russell with 55 seconds. So basically, Valtteri Bottas took an entire lap's worth of time doing a pit stop. That put him way behind. It took him out of second place for sure. It just goes to show it's a ridiculous amount of time. Mercedes massively screwed up here and cost themselves a race victory for sure. And I felt bad for George Russell, who was racing for Lewis Hamilton, who's out with COVID. And I feel like everybody's really believed that. We've all sat at home thinking, I bet George Russell would be great if he got a good car. Well, yeah, that was totally proven right on Sunday where, I feel like we saw maybe the beginning of a star in Formula One. George Russell outperformed Valtteri Bottas, the other Mercedes driver. Remember, Bottas has driven the car all year. He knows the Mercedes very well. George Russell's brand new. He was literally asking during the formation lap, where's the overtake button, so he didn't get it wrong. I mean, George Russell's still learning the car, and he outperformed the other Mercedes driver. I think really this weekend, if anything, was an indictment on Valtteri Bottas. He was a fine driver, but really, the car elevates Valtteri Bottas. Valtteri Bottas does not elevate the car. It's brutal. It's also true. I mean, I don't know how. The ideal lineup next year would be George Russell and I guess here's the one thing I'll say in favor of Valtteri Bottas. I don't want to be too hard on the guy. You know, he had a puncture. He had some problems with that. He had that really bad pit stop. He was getting outpaced by George Russell for most of the race. But also, you got to say, the dude is very consistent. Criticize him for whatever you want. He's nowhere near the best driver in F1. But at the minimum, he's a very, very consistent driver who regularly finishes in podium places and does well. And Mercedes is very happy with him. So I understand, like, they're in no hurry to get rid of him. But certainly George Russell. George Russell's probably the most exciting drive I've seen from Mercedes all year, where Lewis Hamilton is dominant and amazing, and that's actually kind of boring because he's so far ahead every time. When you have a guy like George Russell winning a race, you go, oh, this is interesting. It's new. It's different. It's fun. And the three drivers who've led the most laps in F1 all year are Lewis Hamilton, Valtteri Bottas, and now George Russell's in the top with them. It's kind of crazy. Like, Mercedes dominates this sport. And I just want to see George Russell in a good car. And I felt so bad for him, man, where he's going to win. Then they screwed up the pit stop. Then he was going to podium, but they had to send him back to the pits to take off his tires and put on the right tires again. Then he had a puncture. So he went from first place to podium to points. He ended up getting back into the points with really good driving, got 9th place. And that is George Russell's first ever points in Formula One. But I feel so bad for him. I also got to say, all year I've heard people say, like, the Mercedes car is really bad at following. And they always say that when Valtteri Bottas is trying to get ahead of people and pass people to get back up into the lead. I've heard all year, the Mercedes car is not very good at following. I heard that so many times. And that appears to only be true when Valtteri Bottas is driving, because Lewis Hamilton at times has driven right through the pack up to the front multiple times. We've seen George Russell did it on Sunday. People keep saying this thing, it's just nonsensical, not quite true. Like, I get it, they're not supposed to be they're supposed to lead. The Mercedes car is designed to lead from the front. And they're not really particularly designed for a bunch of passing and overtakes and driving in traffic. I get that. But it does really show how bad Valtteri Bottas is at overtaking, is at getting away, is at driving through traffic. Like, George Russell and Lewis Hamilton have done a much better job all year. Whereas you hear that repeated mistake where people say, well, Bottas can't do it because the car isn't set up for it. Come on, that's just getting really weird and thin. I also want to give a shout out to Esteban Ocon. Esteban Ocon got his first ever podium on Sunday at the Sakhir Grand Prix. I'm happy for him. He's had a kind of a tumultuous year where, there were moments where Daniel Ricciardo was like, get out of my way. And he kind of puts his head down and gets out of the way of Daniel Ricciardo. And he's gotten a lot of criticism all year. I always liked Esteban Ocon. He comes from a lot more humble beginnings than a lot of other people in Formula One. I always liked him on Drive to Survive. And I'm really happy for him. Now, currently in Formula One, the two big battles right now, there's the battle for third in the Constructors' Cup, where we got one race left, Abu Dhabi. And Racing Point right now is in third place with 194 points. Right behind them, you have McLaren in fourth place with 184. And then Renault has 172 points in fifth place. Ferrari's so far back, they're like the 130s. They don't have any chance to win or get third place right now. Racing Point should be the favorite to get third place. I feel really good about. Lance Stroll is fine. Sergio Perez is racing really good. They probably have the fastest car. But it also feels like anything could happen. In this final race, whether it's a DNF, screws things up, or does McLaren have a great day? Does Renault have a great day? Like, anything could happen in this Abu Dhabi race. And the thing you got to watch for is who's going to get third place in the Constructors' Championship, Racing Point, McLaren, or Renault. And then I also got to say, I'm also happy for Otmar Szafnauer. I remember, 2 weeks ago at the Bahrain Grand Prix, we had Otmar Szafnauer handing his head down after Sergio Perez's car blew up he was in a podium place, his car blew up with 3 laps to go. Otmar was crushed. So Otmar Szafnauer, the team principal for Racing Point, watching him get a double podium on Sunday, I went, oh, that makes me so happy. I want him to keep his job. I love the guy. And I'm good for him. And I find myself rooting for Racing Point to get that third place spot. Remember, they were docked 15 points in the Constructors' Championship because people accused them of copying Mercedes' car and that whole debacle. They should be in the lead by even more. So they should be not 10 points ahead, but 25 points ahead of everybody else for third place. So I want to see justice done. I know you could argue justice is Racing Point getting screwed over. I think that they've raced really well all year. They've had so many points taken away from them. And I want to see Racing Point get third place. I think it'd be very, very cool. So it's kind of weird. Think about it this way. You had Sergio Perez on the podium, Esteban Ocon on the podium, and Lance Stroll on the podium. You remember Team Force India? It's kind of weird. Like you had either a former driver for Team Force India who is now remember Racing Point became Team Force India became Racing Point, and Esteban Ocon used to drive for them. So all three drivers on the podium on Sunday were either a driver for Racing Point or a former driver for that same team. Kind of cool, kind of weird, kind of quirky. I like seeing that. Now, in the driver standings, you have Valtteri Bottas in second place with 205 points. You have Max Verstappen in third with 189 points. And it's going to be a fun battle next week because Valtteri Bottas leads by, what is that? I don't want to do the math there. 205 minus 187. He has a 16-point lead on Max Verstappen right now in F1. So if Max wins next week with 25 points, then Bottas finishes in sixth or worse, which is be 8 points or less, then Max Verstappen would get second place in F1. And then if Max gets second place, 18 points, then Valtteri Bottas has to finish just in ninth or better, get 3 points or more, and then Bottas gets second place. So basically what we're going to see next week is a lot of Max needs to win, but win by a certain amount so that Valtteri Bottas doesn't get second place in F1. If Max gets third place in Abu Dhabi, that's 15 points plus fastest lap. And then let's say that somehow Valtteri Bottas does not finish or doesn't get in the points next week. Then we'd have a weird moment where Max Verstappen and Valtteri Bottas would tie for their positioning with 205 points in Formula One. So I'm curious, man. It should be really fun. I don't know who's going to win. The battle for second is going to be fun. The battle for third and the Constructors' Cup is going to be fun. I am not confident that Max Verstappen can beat Valtteri Bottas at this point, where Max really has to pray for something to go wrong with tires or to him to not finish in the points or have a DNF where he doesn't finish. Otherwise, I don't know how Max Verstappen can beat Valtteri Bottas badly enough where Max will win and get second place. But we'll see. It's an interesting storyline to follow. We'll see what happens. It's also worth noting, on Sunday, we saw two new guys race in F1. We saw Jack Aitken and Pietro Fittipaldi. Aitken finished in 16th place, Fittipaldi finished in 17th. It's not really noteworthy. They were the two slowest drivers on the day, one racing for Williams, one racing for Haas. It didn't move the needle for me at all. I didn't really care. I never heard of them. I think Pietro Fittipaldi is actually American, which is kind of cool and interesting. Although I think he races under the Brazil license, so it doesn't matter anyway. But I don't know. We'll see. I'm excited for next week. I don't know if Lewis Hamilton's going to drive. I don't know why Lewis Hamilton would drive. He's already won. He sounds like he's dealing with COVID, and I think I personally really want to see George Russell race again for Mercedes. So I hate to say it, I'm kind of rooting for Lewis Hamilton to stay out, stay away, come back next year or not. I really like watching George Russell race for Mercedes. It's fun, it's interesting, and Lewis Hamilton. I've always said this in sports, man. When someone is the best and they're really truly dominant, it's not interesting. I mean, I look at in the NFL, you have the Kansas City Chiefs. They're so good, and Patrick Mahomes is the best quarterback in the NFL by a mile. I don't actually enjoy watching that. I can respect, on one hand I do, because I really admire people who are great at their craft, and I like watching people like play at a high level, and watching anybody play at a high level is interesting, or race at a high level. But I've gotten to the point where I've watched Lewis Hamilton race so much, and I'm kind of over I get it. It's a spectacle. He's amazing. I get it. I understand. He's the best ever, whatever. But I really want to see, I'm kind of bored of the success. I'm kind of bored of how great he is, and I want to watch something interesting. And I'll tell you what, George Russell in a Mercedes, that's really, really interesting. It's really, really fun. I loved watching it on Sunday. I hope we get another taste of that next week. I don't know that we will, but it'd be cool if we did.